Can you tell the class what you asked me? He said, I asked you, could I put down the weight? I said, why? He said, because it's heavy and I'm tired, right? I said, but like 10 minutes ago, you said that you wanted to hold on to the weight of that issue. And when I said that, he bounced back like I shot him. He says, wow, Mr. Reggie, I never looked at it that way. But anyway.
What's happening, y'all? This is Mike D with Black Fathers Now, where we're bringing the village to the brothers. Every couple of weeks, you can look forward to a quick inspirational message or a thought-provoking guest with knowledge and wisdom, all geared towards helping you be the best father that you can be. We're bringing the village to you. Now it's your turn to do something with what you learned. All right, y'all. Let's go. What's going on, fellas? This is Mike D, Mr. Double Down on You, your favorite personal development coach, with another episode of Black Fathers Now. Now, dig this, man. I have a brother, like, honestly, okay. So this brother, he and I, this is our actual first time having a conversation, but because of the endorsement from a brother that we both respect, meaning or saying that we needed to connect, I didn't really do a whole lot of having to do the background, this or that. I was just like, yo, if Lamar Tyler said, Mike, you need to connect with Reggie, and Reggie said he needs to connect with you, and Lamar was that link, we were like, you know what? That's enough of an endorsement to say, like, man, we just gonna connect, schedule an interview, and make it happen. So, fellas and ladies listening to, I have my man, Reggie Williams, on the line today. And he's a husband, he's a father, he's an author. He's also a subject matter expert in the realm of cognitive behavioral education. And he has a specific calling of being the voice for the marginalized. And we're going to unpack all of that in our conversation today. So fellas and ladies listening to, because y'all like to tune in to what we talk about, let's welcome my man, Reggie Williams. What's going on, man?
What's up there, Mike? Double Down D, man, making it happen, making it do what it do. How you doing today?
Man, you sound like heavy dilly. Oh, man, no, man, dude, I appreciate you coming on and chopping it up with us today, brother.
Look, it is my pleasure, and you are absolutely right, man. If Lamar is E.F. Hutton. If he talking, I'm listening, and if he say do this, I'm moving.
There it is. So look, fellas, before we even get started, that is a gem. The power of endorsement. The power of endorsement. When you got folks who you really respect endorsing something, sometimes it's cool to just go ahead and listen and act. So shout out to Lamar Tyler, man. Appreciate the link up, brother.
Absolutely.
No doubt. So before we get into your story, before we get into your journey and how you're impacting the world currently right now, using your gifts and talents, give us some shout outs, man, because the reality is this. Who are we without our village? Who are we without those entities, those individuals who help us to walk in the full magnitude of who we can be? You know what I'm saying? So give some shout outs to your village, to your team, and to those that allow you to be who you are on a daily basis. I
appreciate that, man. First of all, man, just shout out to our ancestors, man, because it is their shoulders that we stand on that allow us to see what they couldn't see and pave that they couldn't travel down. I'm currently reading a book called 400 Souls, which basically just talks about the 400 years of being enslaved in America and in terms of just who we come from and who we are, man, is an amazing people. I always talk about my grandfather, Casey Williams. He is why, and that's my paternal grandfather. He has impacted my life the greatest. And then it's my maternal grandmother, Callista Nance. And again, she has impacted me. But again, my mother, my father, my wife, my children, man, I have an amazing team. And when I say team, I'm not necessarily mean they are employed by me, but, you know, I look at Bill Hall, man. I look at Jeff Jones. You know, I look at Taj Murdoch, man. These are brothers, Dr. Kevin Jackson. These are brothers, man, that I call. And we're able to build and do things as we're trying to impact the world. So again, you know, the Bible talks about Adam, God saying that Adam should not, it's not good that he be alone and he should have a helpmeet. Sometimes we make that be about husband and wives, but for me, it's really about being people. I can't be who I am without having strong people around me. And hopefully I can do stuff for them that will help them to be who they are as well.
Ooh, that's big, man. That's and the thing is, we're not created to live alone, and we don't live on an island or in isolation. So therefore, and it's funny, you're speaking about the Bible. I quoted a verse from Ephesians earlier today at the recording of this, and it was basically talking about how God gives his gifts to different people. He gives different gifts to different people. And what's interesting about it, when you process that, what it's saying is you don't have access to all the gifts unless you go out and connect with a lot of people. So if you just want to keep the gift that you've been given and kind of roll with that, cool. But if you want access to these other gifts, nobody's been given every gift out there. So you got to get out and connect. And so, yeah, so that team is important, brother. The village is important. That support system is important. So, wow. Jim. So, gave a shout out. Let's now jump into your story. So I read that, you from NYC, but you grew up a country boy in NC, right? And now you're currently in the DMV. So we got all these acronyms, NYC, NC to DMV. Talk to us a little bit about your journey and some of the inspirations growing up, which led you to where you are today, man.
Well, again, my mother and father are from the same town. It's a little town in the southeastern part of North Carolina called Sever, North Carolina. To give people some reference in terms of where it is, if you created a triangle and put Sever in the middle of that triangle, to the southeastern part of it will be Wilmington, North Carolina, which is about 45, 50 miles away. To the northern part of it will be Fayetteville, North Carolina. And then at the top of the triangle will be Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So I'm 45 minutes from each of those areas. Mm-hmm. My mother and father are both from that area. They were both born in the early 30s or the mid 30s. They eventually moved to New York because they wanted a better life. They come from a small, rural, poor farming community. And so that's where I was born, but eventually they made the decision. They just felt like North Carolina would be a better place for me to grow up in terms of this community. So I ended up coming down to North Carolina, and I lived with my grandmother, my mother's mother, but it was my father's father who was just impactful for me. I often tell people that the greatest therapist that I know is my grandfather and sixth grade education, but he had an amazing way in terms of how he dealt with people and how people would come to get his counsel. Growing up, he lived on this little dirt road, and people, pastors, preachers, politicians, and PhDs, when I didn't know what a PhD was, would come sit at this table because they weren't going to make a move until they talked to Mr. Casey. And watching that, I wanted to grow up and be an NBA basketball player. That was just like my dream. But watching him do what he did in terms of the community, it affected me. It affected me the same way that Corona is affecting people today. It put his stamp on me. And then I have my grandmother. Again, I always tell this very quick story. My grandfather came to tell my grandmother that her oldest son had been murdered. And my grandmother does what any mother would do. She had 12 kids, and he was the first. She cried, and then she began to pray. And Mike, when she began to pray, that didn't surprise me because I see my grandmother pray 3, 4, 5 times a day. But 5 minutes after learning that her son had been shot and murdered by this man, she was praying for the soul of the man who had shot her son. 15 years old, I didn't understand that. And it took me 30 years to get the message, but that's what I come from. And that's who I try to live up to. So, while people want to be the next Michael Jordan or the next Barack Obama, I aspire to be half of the people that my grandfather, Casey Williams, was, and my grandmother, Calista Nance, was.
Man, brother, hold on. You first off, you mentioned your grandfather, and you mentioned that you said he didn't get through the sixth grade, right?
Had to quit school to work in the farm.
Quit school to work in the farm in the sixth grade, but yet politicians, statesmen, businessmen, and all would come to sit at the foot of this elder to learn. And it's so interesting, man. About 2 years ago, I interviewed a brother who was born and raised in Senegal, right? And he's currently working in higher education here in the US. but he was born and raised in Senegal. And he talked about growing up in Dakar, Senegal, how in the summers his father would send them back to the village where they originally were from. And he talked about growing up and going back to this village. And while he was in the village elders would always come around and they would see a young guy and call him over and say, well, who's your father? Well, who's your father's father? Who's your father's father's father? And what he would do then was, he said that elder would then give you a song about how that family or how your family has impacted the village. But he talked about this under the landscape of sitting under the baobab tree at the foot of the elders. Right. And so when you spoke, it sent chills up my spine thinking about my conversation with Dave Jai about growing up in Senegal, sitting at the foot of the elders in the village under the baobab tree, getting this wisdom. And it wasn't about, education from an academic sense. It was about life education. And one more thing there is interesting. I heard something recently, and the guy was talking about intellectual or mental processing. And he said early on, it's about processing speed. And as you become an elder, it transitions from processing speed to processing depth. And so it was interesting. It was like, so it made me really just think about the value of the elders. And it's not about the intellectual academic wisdom. It's about this life wisdom. And because of their status in life, they're at a point in which that processing depth is so profound that we can't do nothing but sit there and absorb it. And it's magnificent, man.
And look, you absorb it, and a lot of times they're dropping jewels on you that they're so powerful that you can't understand it right there. You haven't lived long enough to understand the maturity of what they just gave you. And I'm writing a book right now, and I know we'll get into it, called Sitting on Stories from the Porch, because the porch was my university. Sitting there and listening to my grandfather on that porch, man, was he was the educator, man. The porch was the schoolhouse, man, and his stories and his wisdom were my books, man. And so, yeah, absolutely.
Brother, look, you just said something, and we might not even need to say it publicly because somebody gonna take and run with this concept. But Porch University.
Wow, you know what? I need to what do you trademark that?
Yes, dude. I'm trying to tell you, like when you were talking, I was sitting there thinking, and again, I'm from a cultural perspective, brothers and learning. It's Porch University. It's just like I grew up in Augusta, Georgia, right? I can remember sitting with my grandfather. Sometimes it was on the porch, sometimes it was in the garage, sometimes it was on the swing in the yard while he's smoking his pipe, whatever it is, or sitting in his back room while he's playing solitaire. But it's the whole concept of Porch University. Like you're just gaining this wisdom from the elders that you have access to and compiling it, capturing it, but then sharing it with others. We might need to talk a little later, brother. But
anyway. Let's do that. And look, I got talking about the team. I got a brother on my team, Rico Hall from Augusta, Georgia. That brother is invaluable.
Wow.
Invaluable, man. He is amazing, man.
Wow. Yeah, we'll definitely chat offline about that, man. But so you shared the value of growing up with your grandfather, who you ultimately aspired to be, but then you also showed the value of a praying grandmother, right? The concept, and there's a gospel song that says, I had a praying grandmother. Like, I ain't no singer, so I ain't finna go into it. But there, I remember the concept. The title was I Had a Praying Grandmother, and there's something powerful about the faith of a grandmother that you can again learn. Because again, at her age at the time and your age at the time, you probably couldn't process. How can you pray for the fool that just killed your son? Like, I couldn't, even at this point, I couldn't fathom that processing. But letting that stuff get inside you and sit and germinate over time, it starts to make sense. Again, it don't make sense, the action, but it makes sense as to why she was going about it that way. What did you learn from that?
Well, like I told you, Mike, it really took 30 years for me to actually understand the lessons. Now you're making me go into this story. So at I'm 15 at the time. So I'm thinking, I called the mama. I called my grandmother mama. I called my grandfather daddy. I said, in my head, I'm thinking, mama, you got 6 other sons. Let's strap up and go get this dude. That's my thought process at 15. And it's probably the only time that I remember being mad I was like mad at my grandmother because she was praying for this dude. And so fast forward 10 years, the gentleman who shot my uncle never served any time. And like 10 years later, he became sick and he needed the services of a CNA. Mm-hmm. The organization that he went to hooked him up with this particular CNA, and they began to have this great client-patient relationship until this CNA realized that the man that she's been caring for and the man that she likes as a person is the man who killed her father.
Whoa. Ooh.
Yeah.
Pause. So your grandmother's oldest son was killed by a man. She grieved for a second, but then went in, started praying, but ultimately she started praying for the man who shot her son, right? And fast forward 10 years later, the man who shot your grandmother's son
in a whole nother state,
needed the care of a CNA, and that CNA ultimately ended up becoming the daughter of the man that he killed 10 years earlier.
Right.
Jesus.
And now listen, it ain't even, it's not, you haven't even heard it. And so she had a conversation with me and she says, I want to hate him, but I can't. I said, boo, you can't hate him because your grandma prayed for him 10 years earlier.
Ooh.
Right. And so even at this point, 10 years later, I still haven't gotten the lessons, Mike. I'm still like, yo, we really need to get this dude. Like,
we know where he's at. Let's go.
Yeah. And so another, I'm going to say 15 years goes by. And I started a program early 2000. And the court systems here in the DMV, and DMV stands for District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia, would send guys who had some type of relationships with the justice system to come to my class. So on this particular class, I am teaching about anger. And I got this dude in the front of the class, and he's all his, bad words, MF this, I ain't gonna never do this, I ain't gonna never that, and he just went on and he just went in. So the office I had at the time, I had a weight room in my office. And so I asked one of the guys, I said, look, go in the weight room and give me a 45-pound weight. So he brings me the 45-pound weight, and I give it to the dude who's sitting in the front of the class saying he ain't never gonna forgive. And he gets ready, he said, hey, can I go to the bathroom? I'm like, sure. And he gets ready to walk off, and he does without the weight. I said, no, carry the weight. So he carries the weight to the bathroom, brings the weight back, and as he's getting ready to sit down, I said, no, come stand up next to me. And so I got him standing behind me, and now I'm just talking, and I ain't really even trying to make sense, Mike. I'm just talking to talking because I want him to get tired of carrying this weight.
Okay.
Finally, he leans over, he said, hey, Mr. Reggie, can I put down the weight? I was like, nah, man, carry it. Just keep carrying. I keep talking. And when I noticed that he couldn't carry it anymore, I asked him, I said, can you tell the class what you asked me? He said, I asked you, could I put down the weight? I said, why? He said, because it's heavy and I'm tired, right? I said, but like 10 minutes ago, you said that you wanted to hold on to the weight of that issue. And when I said that, he bounced back like I shot him. He says, wow, Mr. Reggie, I never looked at it that way. But anyway, this dude, he graduates out of my class. And I have there's like a Wawa, there's a thing called Wawas where we go get coffee. And I see guys at the Wawa all the time. So I would run into him, and every time I would see him, he wouldn't say, hey, Mr. Reggie. He would say, Mr. Reggie, I ain't carrying that weight.
Wow.
And he said, like the second or third time I saw him, and he said that, it hit me. I said, my grandma prayed for that man because she ain't want to carry that weight.
Ooh.
And so it took me 25 years to really understand what my grandmother had done 25 years earlier. And I often tell, sometimes you have to be careful about what you say to sisters. Sisters say that they're strong Black women. And I have an issue with that whole statement. I said, well, I understand that y'all strong Black women, but I prefer to have a woman of strength because I saw in my grandmother, a woman of strength. And it's different from being a strong Black woman.
Ooh, man, you got to unpack the difference between being a woman of strength and a strong Black woman, because that's like open-ended. You just left it there and minds are going elsewhere. You got to break down what you mean by the difference of being a strong Black woman and a woman of strength.
A woman of strength has a humility to her that is so powerful that you cannot deny its presence. Right? You see it, you feel it, you experience it, and you have to succumb to it. When I hear, and this is just me, and no one has to agree with this. This is
absolutely, it's a good perspective. Yeah, you go ahead.
When I hear strong Black woman, it comes across somewhat vile and negative to me. And I am 6'2" and a half. I'm 250 pounds. I'm of a dark complexion, and I'm a man. And there's no time that I have to go into a room and have to say, I'm tall, I'm big, and I'm Black. Right? That presence is there. So if you have to tell me that you're strong, then that says to me that you may not be as strong as you believe yourself to be, because you have to announce what shouldn't be announced. When you go back to, for me, when you go back to a woman of strength, that strength is so powerful. It's like when you sleep at night and the sun comes up and you see it. That's what a woman of strength is. That's what you have to. I think that we all should aspire to be something of strength rather than something that's strong.
Oh, dude, check this out. You're talking about verbalizing versus actually just living it. I've quoted it numerous times on this podcast, and one of my favorite poems by Langston Hughes is called "Live Your Creed," and it starts off and it says, "For I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day." Right. Then on the last stanza says, "For I may misunderstand you and the fine advice you give, but there's no misunderstanding how you act and how you live." And so what you're saying and what you're doing need to map. And it's interesting that you're saying that, because brothers listening to that, we can take it and utilize that. For us, it's not about being a strong Black man. It's about being a man of strength, right? And a man of strength has a capacity. And let me unpack that for a second. So as a personal development coach, my whole goal is helping primarily Black men, but I don't restrict helping anybody, but primarily Black men to develop the courage and the confidence to double down on who they authentically are. Right. So as you start doubling down on yourself, you then pursue life through your authentic lens. But the ultimate goal is this. The ultimate goal is for you to have capacity and self-control. Capacity and self-control, meaning capacity is, oh, yeah, you're dangerous. Like, you're real talk. Like literally you got the capacity to do whatever is needed. But you also have the self-control and the discernment to know when you need to utilize it. So to me, with the way that you articulated strength, being a woman or a person of strength versus a strong person, is in essence, to me, that person of strength is emphasized in the way that I articulate the concept of having self-control and capacity. It's like, no, you're strong. Now, real talk. If you need to get down, you can get down.
Exactly.
If you need to go handle business, you can handle business, but you understand the discernment. You have discernment, but you also understand self-control, and that's not the only tool in your tool belt.
That's right. That's right,
brother. Woo-hoo. But fellas, I hope y'all ladies listening too, because I know y'all got something there as well. My man Reggie dropped some gems, and so born in New York, moved and grew up in North Carolina, heavily influenced by your grandmother and your grandfather, who really instilled, some aspirational goals that could only come from, an elder and a praying grandmother. But then, you eventually matriculated back to the DMV at some point, and you're into this whole realm of cognitive behavioral education. Talk to us about, I guess, getting back and transitioning back to the DMV, but then also cognitive behavioral education. Like, what is that? How do you use it? Just kind of give us in a nutshell what that is, brother.
Well, my transition back north, so to speak. I met I met her. My wife is a graduate of North Carolina A&T University. So if anyone knows anybody who graduated from A&T, they are a different breed of people.
I got a cousin that just signed a basketball scholarship. She's going there in the fall. So yeah,
I love them. Different breed of people, man. But she's from Richmond, Virginia, and she lived in the DMV. And so I actually met her. I was on panel for an event at A&T, and long story short, I met her there, and we hooked up. And she's like, "I ain't moving to North Carolina," so had to sell the house.
So it was all about a girl.
Yeah, it's all about a girl. And her name is her real birth on her birth certificate. Her first name is Peachy, P-E-C-H-I-E, and her last name is Pleasant. So her maiden name is Peachy Pleasance, and she has a very bright personality. But anyway, you know what? There's a term, social science term called metacognition, and metacognition is knowing why you do what you do. And so for many of us, right, we move about having no idea about why we do the things that we do. I always share this, you know, I don't know if the story is true or not, man, but it works. There's the little girl who's watching her mother bake this ham, and the mother cuts off each end of the ham in the pan. And I think Mike knows that story.
Yeah, I know this story. Keep on with it though. Let everybody hear it.
So you know, she puts it in the oven, and the little girl is a little confused why she did that. She asked her mother, and the mother was like, "Wow, you know, I don't know. My mother did that." So little girl's grandmother's in the room, you know, in the living room or wherever, and she goes and she asks her grandmother the same question, to which her grandmother gives her the same answer. I don't know. It's what my mother did. Right. And so little girl comes back and she asks her mother, "Hey, can I talk to Nana," which is her great grandmother who happens to still be living. And she calls her up and she asks Nana the same question. She said, "Nana, you know, why did you cut off each end of the ham?" And Nana said, "Well, baby, the pan I like to cook my ham in was small. So in order for it to fit, I had to cut off each end of the ham." There you go. Great grandmama had a reason, a cognitive reason for why she was doing what she was doing. But great grandma's daughter and granddaughter was just following suit, having no idea of why you were doing what you were doing. And so with in terms of cognitive definition, is beginning to understand why you were doing what you're doing, why you believe what you believe. I'm not here to say that what you believe is right or wrong. Right? Can't make that decision. But I just need to know, do you understand why you think that way? Understand why you need to do this? And a lot of times when I begin to have conversations with brothers, they begin to realize, wow, you know, I ain't really thinking for me. I'm allowing some culture, some creed, some whatever to think for me. And so the only thing I'm trying to do is just trying to challenge your thought process to get you to see, or to at least examine and challenge what you believe. And once you start to examine and challenge what you believe, oftentimes I don't need to tell you that what you're thinking is right or wrong. You begin to say, wow, you know what? I have a different perspective. And now that my brain has been expanded, it won't go back to where it was, and I need to change what I'm doing.
Ooh, check this out, man. What you just dropped there is such a gem, and I hope brothers and sisters listening really pay attention to what you just said there. You said something. You're here to challenge their thought process. You're not here to tell you you're right or wrong, just here to challenge your thought process. But what's interesting, a lot of times your thought processes, if they just stay in your head, stew in your own head, versus getting them out and getting some different perspective and interpretation on it. Sometimes it's just simply hearing your thoughts said by you, meaning when you write words down. So a tip that I always give anybody who's writing anything, read out loud what you just wrote, right? Because writing it down, it sounds good, but you read it out loud, you're like, ooh, that structure ain't, that's not too good, right? And the same thing in regards to our thoughts. A lot of our thoughts, if they stay in our head and they just continuously circle in our head without coming out, I know not to call anybody crazy, but it can help. It can literally be a catalyst to driving you crazy. Absolutely. And I've come to realize that about myself. Like, doing these podcast interviews at times is cathartic for me because it gives me an opportunity to get thoughts out. When I do an interview, when I'm doing a speaking engagement, when I'm doing something, getting thoughts out is cathartic. It allows me to get these things out of my head and also to get feedback on those things. Because some things that I think are dope, I'm like, yo, this is gonna change the game. I say it and they like, bruh, that ain't hitting on nothing. Right. On the flip side, there's some things that I'm like, that's really not too impactful. And they're just like, dude, that changed my life. Right. You know what I'm saying? But again, challenging your thought process. And the only way to challenge your thought process is to get your thoughts out.
It's you make a excellent point. It's what I call mental constipation, man. Right. If I'm kind of animated when I do workshops and teachers, but the thing is, if you got to go to the bathroom, right, you don't hold it. Like if you got to go to the bathroom and do it, like I'm gonna say a number 2, right, and the bathroom is right there, you go to the bathroom. The person using common sense. I'm gonna hold it, and then it gets a little worse. And now I'm gonna hold it. Now I'm gonna hold it. Well, at some point, it's going to explode. That's right. To get out of the space of being mental constipated, right? And we have to surround ourselves with people who, like I tell people all the time, and this goes back to the shout out in the team. I don't have amen people on my team. No, I don't got no amen people on my team. I got people who gonna make me say, you know what, I don't want to talk to you no more. But in not wanting to talk to them no more, the reason why I don't want to talk to them no more is because they've challenged me, and now I got to do some work. And so we have to get into a space as and I know we can be talking about anyone, but I specifically say this: we as Black men who are going to lead our homes and lead communities, we have to be in a space, man, where we're willing to be challenged, and we can't be scared to say what even sounds crazy. We have to be in a space where we can go to the barbershop and have better conversations, or conversations that excel beyond, is Michael Jordan or LeBron James the best in the world? Right? We have to have conversations where, I can challenge you as a husband, I can challenge you as a father, I can challenge you as a man, and you understand that this challenge is not being critical of you, but it's a test, or it's I don't like the word test. But when a manufacturer builds a car, they crash it a few times. Sure, they get on. It is a test. It's okay. Testing is necessary and vital. Yeah. And so that's the only thing I'm doing, because what we have to recognize is, we have to recognize that we're great, and oftentimes we don't realize that we're great, or if we think that we're great, we don't know how great we are because we are afraid to get out what's in our head. Oh, I don't want to say nothing to Mike, man, because I might look foolish.
Man, bro. We have to be willing to be challenged, right? Because you don't grow unless you become stretched, right? Like if you're gonna stay in your you stay in your bubble, stay in your own echo chamber, then literally you're not going to grow. And what I've come to realize, and this is so interesting, some of the best coaches and teachers first identify individuals who want to be taught and who want to be coached, right? Some of the greatest coaches and teachers first identify who wants to be taught and who wants to be coached, because those individuals at some point will be receptive to growth and development. They want to be stretched. What I've come to realize, and this is kind of like it's kind of a negative fact about, a lot of the populace, is that a lot of people don't want to grow. They're looking to just basically add to their confirmation bias. I just want to be right. I just want to have the right answer. I just want to prove what I already know. I'm not about challenging whether or not what I know is correct or not. I'm not about challenging whether or not what I know is best for me, for my family, for society. I just want to confirm that what I think, what's in my head, is right. And I'm going to keep finding people and putting people around me who are going to further confirm that. And so if I'm going down a path and I want to keep going, who's going to help me go down that path faster, versus challenging whether or not I need to be on that path to begin with.
That's right. That's right. Well, we saw that for the last 4 years in our president.
Oh my goodness! Come on.
So that is a classic case of it. And it's interesting that you say that. Yesterday, I was reading
Ecclesiastes.
Ecclesiastic. God, I couldn't get it out. Mm-hmm. And as you know, for those of us who are in the Word, you know, Solomon was a man who asked for wisdom. Mm-hmm. And I read in there yesterday, man, it's something that just shattered me, man. He talked about, you know, the idea behind having wisdom sounds good, right? But what happens when you have wisdom, now you begin to find out where you are wrong.
Woo!
And that can be a challenging thing, man. And so, like, you know, I said this, I wrote a post, man, probably about 2 months ago, and I entitled the post, Be Wrong. And the whole idea behind the post is that I remember my father was, he liked to tear things up so he can rebuild them. Mm-hmm. And my father was, I tell people my father made me think, my grandfather taught me how to think, right? Mm. And my father would say things like, you know, you measure twice and cut once.
Yes.
And, you know, that's a rule. But, you know, I said in the post, I saw times when my father measured 3 or 4 times and still got the cut wrong. Mm. It's okay. It's okay to be wrong. Because what it does is it gives us a path to where to get to the right space. You know, I saw my father measure 3 or 4 times and cut wrong and recut. It never stopped the process of him building whatever it was that he was building. Mm. We have to get out of this space, man, where we have to believe that we got to be right. It's okay to be wrong. And it's okay to say that you're wrong. You're not going to be less than who you believe you are because you said that. As a matter of fact, you may be more than because you're vulnerable enough to say, I'm wrong.
Ooh, brother, to put a pin in that, I use a statement frequently, and it's helped a lot of brothers along the way. Perfection is not a requirement for greatness.
There you go.
If you look at greatness, in the definition of greatness, you will never see the word perfection in the midst of it. Right. Never. First off, none of us are perfect. That's one. But then 2, it's not a requirement for you to be great. And the moment that you can come to understand that, and also the moment that you can come to understand that even folks who have monumental success in life, usually there's a whole lot of monumental failures as well. Right. But the thing is, nobody remembers the failures because they eventually got to a success. And so the reality is perfection is not a requirement for greatness. One of the most dope album titles of all time was CeeLo Green and His Perfect Imperfections. I was just like, man, that in itself is just, it lays it out. So fellas, don't get inundated with the ability or with the desire to be perfect because you'll never be perfect. It's not a requirement for you to be great. Just go be great.
I actually have a workshop, Mike, called Greatness Sucks. And I named it that because when you began, like when you arrive at greatness,
now what?
It's great. But the process that you had to take to get to greatness has some ingredients in it that sucked. Mm-hmm. Whether it's just having to be disciplined to do what you don't want to do, having the discipline to do what you said you wanted to do long after you no longer feel like doing it. Because sometimes I want to lose 20 pounds, but you know what? Today I want to lay in the bed. So, you know, there are some ingredients in greatness that you've got to employ. You have to have separation. You're going to have to separate from some practices and some people in order to be great because people weren't meant to go with you where you're going, you know? And so, yeah, man, this journey is a beautiful journey when we begin to embrace it for what it is and not what we believe it should be.
Woo! That is a doggone bar right there. And this literally, a buddy of mine had a conversation very recently about the same topic. And it's the whole concept of we romanticize what we want it to be versus accepting what it is. Mm-hmm. We romanticize what we want it to be versus accepting what it is. Once you accept what it is, then you can literally, it's like, all right, cool, let's go. We ready.
That's right.
But I have to first accept what it is. I can't romanticize what I want it to be. I have to accept what it is. And then from there, I can build.
Yep.
And so expect, kind of pivoting a little bit from there and stepping into the title of marginalized voice. Like you're an author, as I mentioned before, workshop facilitator, speaker, cognitive behavioral education specialist. You do all of that, but you're now also the author of A Marginalized Voice. And we mentioned in the intro that you feel like it's your calling to be a voice for the marginalized. Talk to us a little bit about your book, but also talk to us a little bit about the inspirations to writing that particular book.
Well, thank you. Again, it's my baby, man. It's truly my baby. And I spent some years as a journalist, and during those years, people would ask me when I was going to write a book. And I always would think, why would you believe I was going to write a book? Just a journalist does not mean I'm going to be an author. Mm-hmm. But what happens in life is sometimes you live things. Mm-hmm. And so, and working with, when I first started in the business of behavioral health, Mike, I purposely chose men. And the reason that I chose men is because I believe that, everybody was kind of working with youth. So let me work with men, because we need to get some men in order. We need to help some men grow in order to be available to help some of these youth.
Absolutely.
What happened in this process, Mike, was that I began to find that although I was working with men who were chronologically adults, emotionally, they were still children.
Woo!
So ultimately, I found myself working with children a lot longer, emotionally working with children a lot longer than I had known. And during the course of these years, 15, at the point that I began to write the book, I had been in behavioral health for about 15 years. At the point, I just began to, these stories that I had experienced had begun to weigh on me, and I needed to get them out, right? So in other words, it's that stuff
getting out your head.
You need to get it out. And so actually, when I began the process, it really wasn't the book. It was just really me getting these stories on paper, right? And I say that because that's just my journalism background, just writing. And I put the book down. After I wrote the first 4 chapters, I literally walked away from it. Just kind of buried it somewhere, mm-hmm. and went on about my business. And somewhere around 2.5 years later, it was just that tap on the shoulder. God said, yo, dude,
it's time.
I'm going to keep a thorn in your side until you get this book finished. And I'm like, what book? And so again, once I began to pick it up, I just began to reflect on all the conversations and the stories that I had experienced working with my clients over a 15, 16, 17 year period. And I remember one particular conversation that impacted me, that really pushed me on the track to finish it. I was on a radio program, and the subject matter was manhood. Mm-hmm. And, usually when you're on a radio program, you get that 1 7-minute segment.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
But they asked me to be on the show for an hour, right? And so we're on the show, and I do the first segment, which is whatever, 7-8 minutes. We go to commercial break. We come back, we begin to do the second segment, Mike. And somewhere in there, they began to take calls. And this guy calls in, Mike. I still get chills by it. He calls in, he's a little emotional. And he says, verbatimly, I am 63 years old, and I've been waiting all my life to hear what you just said.
Ooh, Lord.
Now, first, I don't know what I said that spoke to your spirit. But what was more important to me was that it took 63 years for him to hear something that affirmed him. Ooh. And what it said to me in that very moment is, not knowing whether or not he was married, not knowing whether or not he had children, but let's just say, for instance, he was married, and let's say, for instance, he had children. And let's say, for instance, his wife said he was a great husband. And let's say, for instance, his children said that he was a great father. What I submit to is he could not be the best husband that he could be. And he could not be the best father that he could be, because he said that he had not been affirmed. And if I have not been affirmed, I can't give you the best of who I am because I haven't even experienced the best of who I am. Right?
Dude.
And so that kind of elevated me to get this book out because, you know, as I told you, I said earlier, my father required me to think. My grandfather taught me how to think. It was under the rule of my parents that I thought marginalized me. Because I told you my parents were born in the early 30s. So that was kind of a period where you didn't question your parents.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
You know
you do as I say.
You do as I say. And it didn't have to have any rhyme or rule, right?
Why? Because I said so. There it is.
Because I said so. Mm-hmm. So I had things in me and I wasn't allowed to say them. And I became angry as a result of it. And even the early part of my marriage, the first 2 or 3 years of my marriage, the thing I would often echo to my wife is, you don't listen to me. True, that may be false. I don't know. But that was the baggage that I was carrying into my marriage.
Wow.
And so this it just became critical to do this. And so, or to write this. And just to give a situation that took place right before Corona, right? I had made the decision that I was never going to become a licensed counselor. I made the decision that I was never going to be a licensed therapist, right? Mm-hmm. There's a whole nother story behind that, but that's my decision. Mm-hmm. Well, long story short is I don't want the state dictating to me how I need to relate to my clients because you don't know how I need to relate to my clients. Mm-hmm. And being critical of any therapist or counselor, but when you have a license, there's things that you say that you can and can't do because you have a license.
That's right.
I don't have a license. So I can work with my clients the way that I need to work with them, the way that I know is effective. But anyway, so a lot of times when I'm in meetings, it's two things. I'm usually one of the few men. I'm usually one of the few Black men. And usually in that meeting, I have the less qualifications in terms of license and stuff, because I told you I refused the license, right? And a lot of my meetings I'm in with therapists, mm-hmm. With doctors. Mm-hmm. So there's this one particular therapist that I have a team of therapists that I work with. And so I had this one particular therapist, young lady, love her to death, man. We work well together. And so we had this meeting and I had to be kind of, had to be a man of strength in that particular.
Gotcha.
And so when we walked out of the meeting, she called me into her office. Hey, Raz, can I talk to you for a minute? I was like, cool. She says, man, your voice is so authoritative. It makes people uncomfortable. And I looked at him like, yo, so what? Did I say something that was wrong? She says, no. Was I rude? I said, no. I said, was my tone out of place? She said, no. I said, so what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to diminish myself because you couldn't take, or they couldn't take what I said? She said, I'm not necessarily saying that. I said, no, that's exactly what you're saying. So here I am, a man, a professional, well-skilled in what I do. My training is as extensive as your training is, but yet and still, because my voice is authoritative, I'm not supposed to speak.
A marginalized voice.
A marginalized voice.
And
as you begin to hear, you know, as we've dealt with the deaths of George Floyd and begin to hear, you see the marches and all that thing, the word that has been used more often than anything else is people feeling marginalized.
And you know, what's interesting, bringing it up in that context, it shows that being marginalized does not necessarily mean socioeconomically challenged. It does not necessarily mean a particular race. It doesn't necessarily mean a particular gender. It doesn't mean that you're in a particular place in which you're the minority. I mean, you can be marginalized in just about any setting. And to me, it's about, from just taking understanding of where you're coming from, it's about giving voice to those individuals, wherever they're setting, whatever their background, giving voice to them who feel marginalized in a particular setting. And anyone can basically get empowered at that particular moment and pull themselves out of marginalization. So how people think about you is on them. How you think about yourself is on you. And
Absolutely.
so somebody can, say that, oh, I'm looking down on you or whatever. But me looking at myself in the mirror, I'm not marginalized. You know what I'm saying? I mean, because that's how I feel about myself. And I think that probably started from someone having a voice or giving me a voice or having a voice for me, which then helped me to over time become empowered to realize that, all right, I'm now in a position in which I need to help speak for some of those who may feel marginalized in various circumstances or situations.
Absolutely. You're so on point. In the introduction of the book, I say specifically that, Black boys are not the only group of people who are marginalized. You have women who are marginalized, Black women who are marginalized, immigrants, LGBTQ community, disabled people, right? I said, but I speak to that particular populations because I think that marginalized or Black boys are probably maybe the only group that there isn't someone speaking for them at a national level.
Whoa, pause. See, dude, check this out. And what you just mentioned a second ago, when you said, when the lady pulled you in the office and said, you were too authoritative in your voice and you were a little, basically what she was saying was, you're a little aggressive, you're a little this, you're a little that. But on the flip side, if I'm talking to Black boys, what are they going to respond to at times, right? When I used to coach youth football, it was interesting. If you had a mama or something on the sideline, they might not like how we're going to communicate at times, right? But the reality is, when you're talking about a 13 or 14-year-old little boy, sometimes the method of communication and the way that you do that is going to be different than mama's going to do it. It's going to be different than can be done in the school room. It's going to be different than can be done in other settings. But guess what? They keep coming back because they respond to that level of communication. It goes to having this diversity of communication. Now, should that be the only way that you communicate to little Black boys? No, they need to understand soft communication and, loving and this and that. They need to understand all different sides of it, right? But the reality is, you shouldn't have to only communicate in one way, turned up 24/7, but you also shouldn't be whispering and being diminutive, on the other end at all times. You got to have this, because at times you're going to need different tones.
That's right. Absolutely. Brandon Marshall, who played, 13, 14 years in the NFL. I saw an interview with him the other day, and, he has a personality disorder, and I don't really remember what it is. And he was talking about, he went to therapy. Yep. And, he was just, in his therapy sessions, man, he just kept pointing the finger. And finally, one day, man, the therapist got up in his mug and like, yo, shut up, man. And Brandon said it shocked him and he responded accordingly. But you're right. You have to understand that, there's a hard tone that sometimes needs to be heard. And there's a soft tone. And that's the balance of, I'm kind of getting off course here, but that's
you're good.
Having both your mother and your father in your working. You hear the term co-parenting, and co-parenting is when the two people are not together. We have a child, but we're not together. I challenge that thought process. I don't care if you're married and you live in the same household.
You're co-parenting.
Because sometimes we have different, like if I come from the South, you come from the North, and you've been taught one way coming from the North, and I've been taught one way coming from the South. We bring who we are into our parenting experience, and we push that on our children. So, but it's the idea, man, of having, you're one part, there's a sperm and an egg. Yep. That's what it takes to have a child.
That's it.
And so
it takes two parts.
It should take the progenitor of the sperm and the egg to be in there raising, because they need both sides of those equations to be whole. And sometimes we get too much
of one. Yeah. Dude, can I tell you what's even crazy about that? Like, even hearing you say it, and I catch it at times, like with my wife and I, right? So like with my son or my daughter, sometimes I'll be a little more direct with them in regards to my communication. It's like, man, you need to figure out how to fix this, or you need to do this, you need to do that. And then, she might come at me a little bit saying, you're being a little tough on them. And it's interesting. And it's funny as you say that, because I was thinking back to a very recent one that we had in that regard. But it's a balance, right? In the sense of, I'm very loving, supportive and everything. But then there are times in which you need to show them that, hey, y'all got to figure out how to get through this. Sometimes it's okay to cry, right? It's okay to cry. It's okay to go through the full range of emotions. But then there are also times in which you got to wipe the tears, dust the dirt off your knees and get up and figure out how to make this thing work. And so it's like this whole balance narrative that we got to have all of these tools in our tool belt. Again, it's okay to cry. It's okay to like, I'm a married dude with a daughter and a son. I'll cry at the drop of a hat. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
But on the flip side, I also know where sometimes it's like, look, I can't cry right now. I got to dust this thing off and figure out something,
I got a perfect story for you, man.
Give it to me.
So I told you about my wife and her name, and she has this very bright personality, doesn't let a lot of things get under her skin. So one day we are watching our daughter play soccer. She's on the soccer team in high school, and we're on one end of the field, daughter's on the other end of the field, and she apparently gets knocked down, and apparently she was a little dazed. And as she's trying to get up on the other end of the field, there are adults who are jeering at her. And some of the adults are grown men. Like, they're saying whatever they're saying. So here this mild, meek individual jumps up and she's getting ready to run down there. Now, I could be that aggressive dude because, so I say, sweetheart, I think you should sit down. It's just like, sit down. Why? So, nah, I'm going down there to check on Jade. I said, no, baby, just sit down. Well, you gonna allow them to say what they're saying? You're not gonna say anything? I said, yeah, baby, just sit down. So she finally sits down. She said, I don't understand that. I said, baby, in life, Jade is going to get knocked down. Life, Jade is going to be a little dizzy. And while she's knocked down and dizzy, she's going to have people jeering at her. If she doesn't learn how to get up now, she'll never learn how to get up. Go down there and handle this, I absolutely do. But if I handle this, I'll be satisfying me rather than giving the lesson that Jade needs to have.
Fellas, pay attention, man. Pay attention. Like that, I dropped a video the other day, just a little quick, I think it was an Instagram live, and it was the concept of the difference between growing up and being raised. And I was saying how I grew up I was raised in Augusta, Georgia, from 0 to 18, went off to college, but I didn't grow up until after college because I didn't have any responsibilities growing up. So pretty much it was just doing as you're told and, do your thing, which led me to when I got to college, I didn't perform well. I literally graduated by the skin on my teeth, because I didn't have responsibilities and all of that. I didn't really grow up until after college when it was really on me, where I had to take care of things. I had to figure things out. And so to your point, you gave a lesson in growing up, not just being raised, because you gave her an opportunity to grow up in that particular moment. And I think as parents, this is Black Fathers Now, the podcast, I think at times as parents, we remove the opportunity for our kids to grow up in moments and we just raise them. We have to find opportunities where we can do both at the same time so that as they mature and as they age, they're not just getting raised, but they're also growing up. So once they hit the open market, go to college, move out, get jobs, start businesses, whatever, that they're at a place of maturity in which they can handle it. And that's something that I'm reflecting on my life, that I was raised well, but I really didn't grow up until a little bit later.
Absolutely. I tell fathers all the time, stop living in the thought process that you're going to protect your children. Because the reality is there are some things you can protect them from, right? But what you need to do more than protect them is to prepare them.
Yeah. Ooh.
Because the thing is, can you protect your son or your daughter, whoever, from being stopped by a racist police officer? Can you protect your child from having to deal with a teacher who was not cognates or who will not meet your needs. These are things that, you can't protect your children from, but what you can do is prepare them. So my thought process, and I didn't do this early on. So, this is me growing up, right? As much as we want to protect them, what we have to do a better job is to prepare them, because there will be times that even if you could protect them, there will be times when you can't. They're prepared for that moment, then that will get them through it.
But I'll tell you, and I think that literally goes back, and we're basically playing tennis back and forth. And I love this because it's adding emphasis to the point of preparation and protection. Both need to be done at the same time, but we need to do both at the same time. We shouldn't just protect and protect only. We need to protect while we prepare. And, as far as preparation is concerned, in the movie Black Panther, I always take it back to that scene when T'Challa went to the land of the ancestors with his father. And he was talking to his father and he said, "Father, why did you leave me? I was not prepared for you to leave me." And his dad, T'Chaka, said, "Son, a man who has not prepared his own children for his death has failed them as a father. Now, have I ever failed you, son?" And he said, "No, father." So when you stop and you think about that, it's about protecting. Because again, it's a scaling thing, right? It's a sliding scale where you protect them, and do your thing. But while you're protecting, you're also preparing. Because at the end of the day, the goal is for you to go on to glory at some point, and then for them to still be here. So what happens when you're no longer here, and all you've done is protect and you've not prepared? So that's extremely important, my man.
I was looking, I got the book over here next to me. I was looking because that is in the book.
Oh, really?
That was so powerful.
Yes.
Because and shift this a little bit. I had a friend whose mother passed, and I hope this is in line, but I had a friend whose mother passed, and he was struggling with this thing. He was dude was just deeply depressed. And the worst thing, I tell people, man, when people are dealing with, especially deaths, you can't counsel them out of that stuff, man. You got to allow them to be.
That's right.
But I was so kind of distraught with him, and so I asked, I said, "Hey, can I say something? Can I share with you?" And he said, "Sure." And he said that because he knows I'm someone who, I'm safe, or he's safe with me. I said, "Tony, let me ask you a question. Would you prefer for your mother to see you laying in a casket, or would you prefer to see your mother in a casket?" And he says, "I would never want my mother to see me in a casket." I said, "Well, then you have to learn how to deal with her death." And so my point is that if we go along the natural order of things, if we, and God has a different plan, go along the natural order of things, we are going to die before our children. And we need to make sure that we have seeded in them what they need to have when we're gone. Because if we don't, then we have done them a disservice.
Woo. We need to make sure that we have seeded in them what they need for when we're gone. And if we don't, we've done them a disservice. Like brother, literally, we could talk for hours and hours and hours. We might have to do a round 2 of this because I'm loving this conversation. How can brothers and sisters listening to, how can they gain more information about what you have going on? Grab a copy of A Marginalized Voice, book you to do workshops, learn more about cognitive behavioral education from you, just to chop it up with you and connect, man. What's the best way for brothers and sisters to connect with you, man?
Well, let me give you everything. My website is Reginald Williams, which is my name, reginaldwilliams.org. And it tells you, everything about who I am, what I do, what my programs are. It has contact information on there, but my contact information is book Reggie, BOOK Reggie, at reginaldwilliams.org. And if you want to purchase a copy of A Marginalized Voice, which I think that you should, there's a word that well, let me say this. You can purchase at amvonlinestore.com. So it's amvonlinestore.com. there's a word that a few years ago I had a program where I was working with youth 18 to 24, and they either had to be in a gang leader, they had shot somebody, or they had gun use, or they had some type of prison or jail term. And every other month, we would have this nationwide call where we would begin to tell what we were doing in our program, and how we were growing our program. And on this particular call, there was this white woman from the Midwest, probably mid-50s. And to be honest with you, initially I had an implicit bias. I'm like, what can a white woman, from Midwest in the 50s tell me about young Black boys? Like, what can you tell me? Well, let me tell you something. She told me so much, man, that she slapped me 7, 8, 9, 10 times, man, because she was so in depth with her knowledge. And she used this term, or this word called iatrogenic. Iatrogenic is a medical term that basically says that when someone comes in for a medical procedure, a well-intended doctor does unintended harm.
That's right.
So, that could be used in any form. And actually, between the story I told you earlier with the man who was 63 years old, he had, that story and that word iatrogenic, I wrote A Marginalized Voice, because what happens is there is a lot of iatrogenic behavior that takes place, that these nuances that most people don't look at, that affects Black boys in the way that they affect them. My wife is a Montessori teacher, so she has 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds. So every now and, especially being home with COVID, and every now and then I'm hearing lessons that she's doing. I hear her working with those boys, and I'm able to pull her to the side and say, you shouldn't have did it that way, and she's receptive. But A Marginalized Voice, man, it speaks to who these boys are. I've named the chapters the way that I named them to create some attention. Like, for instance, the chapter, there's a chapter for fathers I call superheroes, and that chapter basically says that you have to stop being a superhero in your son's life and teach him to find a superhero within themselves.
That's right.
The chapter called Sever the Chords, that's the chapter that I have for mothers. And that chapter talks about that mothers have got to have this separation of umbilical cord, right? It's too often that they keep it, they keep this attachment to their sons that's dangerous, and you need to sever the cord so that you can have a wireless connection. And then I talk about the school system, which is, I entitled that Indoctrinated Learning, because it's not an educational system, it's an indoctrinational system.
Absolutely.
And then there's the chapter that I have on therapy, right? I am big on therapy. I love therapy. I dislike a lot of therapists. So the treadmill therapy, because a lot of times these therapists are not equipped to be therapists for these young Black boys. And then I have a chapter, I speak to the church, and I call it The Least of These. Basically challenge, like, you got to do a better job. So it's a phenomenal book. I say that proudly. The book is in, and you might appreciate this, the book is in, you from Georgia, but
I live in Tennessee. I'm from Georgia, but live in Tennessee. Yeah.
Okay. But the book is in Ridgeland Correctional Center in Ridgeland, South Carolina. And I got an envelope last week, and I opened the envelope up, and there were 15, 16, 17 notes written to me from these inmates about the book. And I broke down crying, man, because, to know that it touched them. And, so the book is a good book, and it's one that people should read. There's one guy who says, he says, where's Oprah's book club when you need him? I'm like, that's my man right there. when he get out, I'm gonna make him my PR rep.
There you go. There you go. Where's Oprah's book club when you need them? Well, guess what? We're gonna make it happen. Black Fathers Now family, check this out. Y'all make sure to support my man Reggie Williams with a marginalized voice. You can grab it at amvonlinestore.com, amvonlinestore.com. Make sure to visit reginaldwilliams.org, reginaldwilliams.org, and also book Reggie at reginaldwilliams.org if you want to email directly with him. And literally from there, you can get his, Instagram, Facebook links, all that kind of stuff. And you can connect with the brother. And as you can tell, he's got some stuff that could really help you. So make sure to reach out to him and let him know you heard about him if you don't already know about him on Black Fathers Now. All right. Well, my brother, man, like I said, I want to salute you for what you do, the work that you're doing, the heart that you have, the impact that you're making within our community. And I want to encourage you to continue doing so, because guess what? You're doing it not just for you, but for generations to come. And I salute you and I thank you, my brother.
I give all that back to you, man, because without you, guys like yourself, man, doubling down, we wouldn't have a platform to be able to tell this story, man. And this is what is required of us, man. We have to collectively come together, the same way a car has different parts in order to drive down the road. The book is not what it can't be what it is without having folks like yourself. So I appreciate you, man. Thank you. And thank Lamar.
Yes, Lamar Tyler. Appreciate you, brother. Shout out, man, for connecting the dots here, man.
Yeah.
So fellas, as always, make sure to subscribe to Black Fathers Now via your favorite podcast listening platform. Visit blackfathersnow.com. Also, grab a copy of my book, Dynamic Black Fatherhood Manifesto, currently available on Amazon. You can get it also from blackfathersnow.com. Also, if you are a to-be father, or ladies, if you are married to, connected to a brother who's about to be a father for the first time, from blackfathersnow.com, you can register for my new course called Jumpstart Fatherhood. 15 modules necessary for excellence in fatherhood. 15 modules necessary for excellence in fatherhood. It's going to give you everything needed to step into fatherhood with courage and confidence. All right. Well, fellas, again, we want to thank my man Reggie Williams. And until next time, y'all be blessed, well, and wise. And I'll holler at you. Peace.
Peace.
Yo, fellas, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And always visit blackfathersnow.com, as well as follow Black Fathers Now on virtually every social media platform you can think of. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, everywhere. Just follow us and engage with us, man. Look forward to hearing from you. And I guess until next time, I'll holler at you. Peace.